Yeah,
it.
your first step too.
How come it's not going off, Chris? Chris, do you want to mic up? I can play last week, that's why. Do you want to mic him? I'm short, so that's why I just said I don't need to. I can just hold it. But.
Good morning, everybody. So I hope everyone had a good summer and that the academic year has started up well. We are trying different format from the Treasurer's Town Hall than we have been doing in the past, having a broader array of topics and also other than people speaking other than me, which is good for you. It's good for me. It gets around. The other thing, we are broadcasting this on the web. If you have a question, please wait for one of us to get a mic to you so that the people on the internet can hear the question as well, and I appreciate that. We have 4 topics today. We're going to have an overview by Kathy Detloff on the budget that we just completed in July, and the one that's just now starting. Is 12 month cycle budgeting. Then Chris Bailey will talk about budget planning and forecasting, year-end activities by Interim Controller Ernie DeSandro, and then finally the activities of the Project Management Office by John Fahey. We are open to any and all questions along the way on these topics or other ones. Also, we have the Ask the Expert sessions scheduled immediately after this, and we have the experts in the room. For a while, I thought they were going to be the only people in the room, so I'm glad the rest of you showed up. And we hope to have a good session. We would like to get feedback on this format from you. If you like it, if you don't like it, if you'd like to hear something else, if you're not, please contact us. You can write to finance at finance@rutgers.edu, the web email address, and every single email to that is reviewed and dispatched. But we would like to get your feedback on that. So, without further ado, I want to turn it over to Kathy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kathy Detloff, Vice President of Finance and Budget at Rutgers. So if I haven't met you, I hope I have the opportunity to personally meet you after the meeting. One thing I want to start off by saying is just thank you. We have done so much work in the last 12 months between the different things that we've done with the chart of accounts, and I know that the budget process and the reporting process has gotten so much more robust over the last 12 to 18 months. It's new for everybody, and I think everybody's putting out a great effort. So as Mike indicated, and I've been trying to communicate across our different key stakeholders, the budget process never ends. Right? It is definitely a year-long process. So while we are just now finishing up getting the budget spreads in for this current fiscal year, we are already ramping up for fiscal year 20 preparations. So that is something I do think is new, and it's a bigger process here just because of the size of the institution. So thank you for all that you do. I always tell my colleagues that the better job you do, the easier my job is, and I can tell you why. As you know, the budget gets approved by the Board of Governors in a public hearing in July. So prior to that, we do a lot of work that really is a bottom-up process. So meaning that what you're doing in each of your schools and centers throughout the year, we first put that together in a Camden presentation, and then the Camden presentation goes together with our other campuses and Central University to the final budget gets consolidated, and it is approved at the board level. Each of the campuses are represented individually, and then the consolidated budget is approved. So that's really important for you to know, because I know when I first got here and I said, gosh, why is this number this way? People didn't know that what they put in Hyperion ended up in some form in front of the Board of Governors. So that does change the context a little bit. So when we look at the budget in total, you see that the largest portion of our budget is made up of student tuition and fees at 30%. So this is why the discussions we have early on that we're starting to have already about Budget 20 is so important, because we do have that priority of access and affordability for our students. But on the other side, we're trying to balance that with it is our largest revenue source. And that is followed by the state appropriations and the state paid fringe benefits. Again, we are very grateful to the state for the support they give us, but we also know that that's not skyrocketing anytime soon. So we have to balance that as part of our budget initiatives as well. With the addition of RBHS, we do have significant healthcare revenues, affiliated and house staff revenues. So that's an important part of our budget as well. The remaining portions of our budget is really where we often have opportunities. So our philanthropy here at the university, I'd love to see that piece get a lot bigger, right? So that would be able to support our programs and our initiatives. And that's really a small part of our budget that could possibly grow over time as the foundation kind of gears up in different campaigns. That's where we have some opportunity. And then our auxiliary enterprises, that's mostly housing, dining, parking, our bookstores. So that adds to our budget as well. Here's the tough stuff, right? All of our revenue sources, none excluded, have really a ton of pressures on them. And this is what we're challenged with when we're trying to build our budgets. We do have that access and affordability that we want to keep our tuition and fees as low as possible. And there's such public scrutiny on student debt and the cost of education and making our students successful even after they leave here. So we have to be careful. We know that the state government, New Jersey has a bigger budget issue than we do here at Rutgers, right? So they're trying to deal with their own balancing of their budget and the skyrocketing of healthcare costs. They're challenged with the same thing. So we know that appropriation, we are very fortunate this year. We got some additive appropriations last minute, but we know that those are constrained. So we look at our healthcare, and we know that there's regulations associated with that. And then finally, our grants and contracts, right? So we do a good job at budgeting them very conservatively, and we need to balance that with what revenue sources can we really anticipate come in through grants and contracts. So on the expense side, look at that big red block. Salary and wages make up almost 50% of our total expense base. And when you add in fringe benefits with that, I think it's 64%, 65%. So we have 26, 24, something like that, labor unions that are currently under negotiation. So we are definitely at a detriment right now because we do not know what our salary expenses are going to be this year because we don't know what the result of those labor negotiations. So we always keep that in mind. We're doing a lot of scenario planning. We know what we think it might be, but then we also have to know if it's, what our different scenarios are because there may be a gap that we're going to have to fill as soon as those contracts are signed. Scholarships and fellowships make up not quite 10% of our budget, but this is such an important part because this is really the support of our students. These get funded through Rutgers dollars as well as from the federal and state aid that you saw on the previous slide as a revenue source. And then we have basically our other non-compensation expenditures, and this is where we really do have the lever, is what I call this is our lever, right? This is where we can gain efficiencies and really try to cut these costs because with salary and benefits, we don't really have a whole lot of power to control them except by the number of people that we employ. So again, 24 labor unions with negotiated mandated salary increases. We have our fringe benefit costs that are dictated by the state. Financial aid, such an important part of our budget. So that's where we go from there. We are starting our 20 process. So if you're a cost center, I hope you're gearing up for that. Chris is going to go through with you some of the little changes in the process to make it better, and we will continue to get better. Does anybody have any questions before I hand it over? Thank you for your time this morning.
Hello, my name is Chris Bailey. I'm the Assistant Vice President of Budget and Financial Planning. I just want to take a few minutes as someone that's a little more new to the team. I've only been here about 4 months. Happy to be at Camden to have my first introduction here in front of the town hall. I'm a South Jersey resident. I have a lot of strong ties to Camden. My grandparents lived here for many years. My grandfather was a police officer in Camden, became a security guard at RCA, where their local plant is now the Victor building, where condominiums are housed. The locals call it the Nipper building. And if you know anything about RCA, the emblem is the white dog sitting in front of the phonograph. That building has a stained glass at the top of it, and the Nipper building is the name of the dog. So that's the actual story behind it. So now that I've tried to soften you up a little bit, let's talk about the budget. So we start off the fiscal year, the budget being approved by the BOG, Board of Governors and Finance Facilities Committee. We just went through the spread exercise, as Kathy mentioned. So we have everyone's budget spread in now. Those budgets should be loaded by the end of September. Really important, an email went out last Friday about signing up for training for the cost centers, regardless of whether you're a central cost center or a campus cost center, encouraging folks to attend those trainings. They're from September 17th, Monday through the 28th, through basically the end of September. We will have trainings in each of the campuses. So Camden, New Brunswick, Newark will have sessions encouraging folks to sign up for that training. That will lead us into October, where the cost center budgeting will actually take place in the new enterprise planning and budgeting system, the replacement of the Hyperion planning system. So that will be available for revenue expense in October. In November and December, we will also have training sessions for workforce planning, which is a new piece that we're really excited about within the EPB system. So December, Budget Committee will review final cost pool requests. In January, very busy month, Q2 forecasts are due. We're finalizing the 20 cost pool budgets. And then tuition and fees are submitted to the budget office, and then the central and campus-based cost center budgets, tuition and fees finalized, rates are due in those areas. So very busy Q3, especially in January when we're trying to finalize the cost pool budgets and getting in the forecasts. Q4 responsibility center budgets are due. Q3 forecasts are due to the budget office. We then start to really develop and consolidate those university board budgets after meeting with each of the RCs, finalizing the campus's budgets, preparing for that meeting in July, finalizing that budget in June for the FNF and BOG meetings. So the enterprise planning and budgeting tool. So a lot of time has been spent. We've had committees, we've had planning groups, several meetings on this. I want to go back even to the calendar to say that, you know, again, September, that training for revenue expense, really important to attend for the cost centers. But in November, we're going to also need you back to attend the workforce component of that training. Really stressing the need to you know, test, understand the issues, if any, that we're having with the system. We know that that process will evolve even as we go live in January. I'm sure we're going to get feedback. Goal is to always improve the system after it's being utilized. Again, aligning HR and budget needs to plan by employee for compensated related expenses. So important, something that, you know, as Kathy pulled up the slide, half of our costs are in salary and wages. So really to get our arms around that area, extremely important. Aligning budget and HR strategy with units priorities, another goal that we're striving for. At the end of the day, we're trying to create a stronger budget, a more predictable budget, track vacancy rates, allow for better allocation of resources in the current year and the following year. Leads us into budget forecasting. So, you know, like we said, in January, we're going to expect Q2 to come in, units to submit that. April, Q3, we're trying to set a quarterly tone for forecasting. That's going to allow us to better track year-end goals, identify risks early, whether or not things are being transacted correctly to individual lines, not finding that out late in the process, but early. And then helping you structure your budget for the next budget cycle, identifying those areas early. By forecasting, we can see those issues, know how to budget correctly for the following year, understanding those trends. I think as fiscal officers, we all don't like to be surprised. So identifying those issues early is really important. And I think this is, you know, my 4 months here, I've heard a lot of great stories, a lot of meetings about what the units are trying to accomplish. And, you know, precise budgeting and forecasting should tell your story through the numbers. That's what we're trying to get to. So extremely important, you know, forecasting and the enterprise planning and budgeting tool, we think they're going to be, you know, relied upon, very valuable for us to use in the current year and then the prospective budget year. That's it. I hand it off to Ernie, the controller's office. Is there any questions before I hand it off to Ernie? Go ahead.
Online. Should responsibility centers sign up for Hyperion training now or hold off?
The responsibility center should hold off until the workforce becomes available. So November, December is when the responsibility centers should attend the trainings. So they get revenue expense and workforce planning at the same time.
Does anybody have any questions about the new system or anything like that? Come on. We got like one memo and no one's experience.
We'll have questions after, I think, September 18th when we're introduced to it.
Barry.
So just to go back to the original Camden ties, probably the proudest moment, I think all parents can agree with this, happened only a few blocks away at Cooper Hospital where my daughter was born. Same hospital I was born. So like I said, I had a lot of Camden ties, love Camden, and handing it off to a fellow Eagles fan, Ernie DeSandro. There you go, Ern. Thanks.
Good morning. Thanks. Yes, Chris said I'm an Eagles fan. I'm a Philly fan. I'm born and raised in Philadelphia. Attended college in Philadelphia. It's a pleasure to be working in New Brunswick. For those of you who don't know me or know me, I've been involved with the university now for really since the integration. I was a partner with Ernst & Young that helped with the initial set of consolidated financial statements after the integration, did some preliminary work on the chart of accounts. And then 2 years ago, I came on board with the university really just to try to help with the stabilization. One of my first duties here was to set up a help desk for the go live of Oracle Financials Cloud. So to echo some of what Kathy's comments, I've kind of been through some of the planning and some of the go live pain, and I wanted to thank everybody. I feel like for the first time we're coming out of this really to be able to look at our numbers and understand the value of the system, and to then be able to get real insight into what makes the university tick. But on a personal note, as of May 31st, I took on the role to be the interim university controller. That means I lead the university controller's office, some of the activities through the transition as we find a new controller. Right now, we're managing the year-end close, working with the auditors who are on site now. I'll give you a little bit of detail around that. And some other items. I think there's plenty of going around, and we're hearing this consistent theme, but the close process is something that we're also changing the mindset. It's a year-long process that we are constantly working on. So we'll get into more details about that a little bit later in this presentation. Personally, I'm a big fisherman. I like offshore stuff. I love to do that. I have a YouTube page and things like that. If people ever wanted to go there, just look up bacala. Personally, I also, again, just as an introduction, I have a beautiful wife, 2 wonderful children, 2 daughters who are college age, just to kind of set that straight as well. But as we're thinking about the presentation here, the one thing I was thinking about was, wow, we did a lot of push right around the year end on lots of webinars, lots of changes in the way we were transacting in the system. And so I thought it would be a good idea to kind of summarize some of those changes and kind of refresh everybody to where we're at. One of the first things that we put in place were things that we call cross-validation rules. This is really kind of the first time we're meeting as a town hall after these presentations. So I wanted to make sure that we reviewed these items. Cross-validation rules, if you kind of remember, we had a system where we were able to create combinations of unit, division, and org without regard for each of what those individual segments meant. And therefore, we had like a ton of UDO combinations that were really not valid. That's the most obvious thing that we did that impacted, how we were managing the number of combinations. We put cross-validation rules to determine, if you pick this unit, you must pick some of these, one of these divisions, and if you pick that unit and division, you'd have to pick, some of these organizations, so that we at least started with minimizing the amount of combinations. That did a lot for us to kind of get the data in a spot where we could analyze it more efficiently. Some of the other things that we tried to do was cross-validation rules that determined, for particular fund types, which business lines should be used with which fund types, which accounts should be used with which business lines, et cetera. There are over 75 cross-validation rules that are in the system today. One of the biggest things is that a lot of this work has been done. It's built into the system as a user tries to transact against these things, whether you're in Marketplace or in the general ledger, and these cross-validation rules are enforced, and that at the time that you're doing the transactions, you're presented with, error messages if you're trying to do an invalid combination. And I think that's helped a lot for us to try to make sure that we're getting the message out, that the users understand how they're supposed to transact, and then ultimately how we're getting data out of the system. So as I mentioned, PeopleSoft and Marketplace also use these same cross-validation rules. And I wanted to get that out on the table just to remind everybody. A lot of this is done and behind us and behind the scenes, but certainly as folks are trying to transact, you may be hitting these things. So they're still in the system. The next big item that we talked about were subledger accounting rules. Again, these are the rules that determine how the project subledger interacts with the general ledger. And really, our biggest thing that we had here was in the sponsor project area, we put some rules in place in project costs. Before we put the subledger accounting rules in place, users were able to, they set up a project in the sponsor project area with a particular owning organization, and then all the other segments of that particular grant. However, on the expense side, it was really left to whoever was doing that transaction to choose the same unit, division, or fund, the whole chart string. And we found that that resulted in a mismatch where we had revenue going to one place and expenses going to another. And so that was kind of the biggest subledger accounting rule, where we said for all sponsored projects, expenses, regardless of what the user enters into the system, would follow the project organization setup, or the project setup, whether UDO, LFB. So at the very least, we were having at least the revenues and expenses aligned at the project level, which really helps us determine for surplus and deficits at the particular sponsor project level. We did a similar item for non-sponsor projects, except for we've allowed some flexibility with location and business line, I believe, on the non-sponsored side. And then we determined that the natural accounts should be driven by whatever the expenditure type is in the project at that time. Again, just ensuring alignment so that as people are transacting in the project subledger, as it goes through the general ledger, we have rules in place that kind of make sense, that have revenues and expenses aligned. We put 3 more subledger accounting rules in place that also help for this purpose. The F&A on the indirect cost recoveries, so that we're calculating that on the fly as expenses are being incurred. We're burdening that and calculating the indirect revenue on that, as well as the recovery from that. The grant fund type subledger accounting just ensured that one of our challenges is always, and one of our goals is to reconcile from the project subledger into the general ledger system. And what we were finding is that people were booking entries directly to the general ledger. That was making this reconciliation a little bit difficult. And so we put a subledger accounting rule in place that basically said, the only way that grant revenue or expense can come through to the general ledger is through the project subledger. So we put, approval and rejections in place if people were trying to hit those grant fund types directly to the general ledger. And that has helped us immensely so that, we've been able to get training out to folks, people who had questions about how can I make adjustments to a project, and so that we had to remind folks that we have a project to project to GL cost transactions and revenue transactions that you should do them with. So there are still ways to affect the general ledger. It just has to go through the project subledger, and I think that has helped us get a lot of training out as well as folks were having those types of questions. On the payroll side, the biggest change we did, and this is fairly recently, was for employee charging instructions, we were able to inherit the UDO LFB from the project for sponsored projects, which I think has helped departments as they're trying to charge. The moment that you charge somebody to a specific project, it inherits the accounting from the project setup, which makes it a lot easier. And again, helps us align the expenses to where the revenue is. Okay. This next one is internal purchase orders, IPOs, really internal charges. We did a series of webinars, and we launched a procedure we called expense recoveries. This is an evolving item in our, as we try to give guidance, we get information back from the field that helps us understand some of the challenges that are going out in the field. And this is an example where at very first thing we did was try to get some sense of consistency that, we have a list of internal suppliers that provide services to other internal organizations, that we've established a set of natural accounts that both sides of the transaction need to transact on and use, so that at the end of the day, these charges zero out. And we've had a lot of feedback on that. So there's, folks that are saying, well, I used to do this, and how do I do that? And we're getting information that will continually help us make better decisions on how this evolves. But right now, our biggest challenge was making sure that if you're using IPOs, that you're using the same natural account on both sides for these internal charges. And one of the things that we did just recently with the help of the folks in the procurement office in purchasing was that for purchase orders, the IPO requisitions, we've updated each of the forms with the natural accounts that are supposed to be used on both sides. If you are trying to transact against an IPO and you use a different number, it will automatically be rejected since those forms have been updated. However, there's approximately 5,500 IPOs that are out there now where they have invalid or mismatched accounts between the supplier and the consumer. Starting this week, we've actually been providing to the vice chancellor reps and the central business managers the reports on these 5,500 with the hopes that this information gets disseminated out to the owners of these IPOs, and hopefully that either unfortunately the only way to fix this is to cancel the PO and do another PO. What the guidance that we're giving is try to use your outstanding balances on those POs before December 31st, or at your leisure, go through, cancel the PO, and do the right IPO with the same natural accounts. Our guidance has been December 31st on this, so after December 31st, we're going to cancel them for everyone. So that's an important action item. That's why it's in red here. But it's certainly one of the challenges and one of the tasks that you have immediately over the next couple months. At the controller's office, we will start, and we have started making reclassification entries. So we use these reports to say, we've got both sides of this transaction using different natural accounts. We're going to take the offending the incorrect natural account and do a reclassification entry. We're going to do that centrally for all of these until they get fixed through the process. We had heard that the units are making, these reclasses since we've given out a lot of this guidance. But we're asking that the units stop doing that and that we will manage this thing centrally because we're trying to keep the communication through the vice chancellors and the business unit reps, the central business managers, excuse me. And again, December 31st is the deadline for that. Like I said, there's a lot of evolving questions that come out of this policy. This is the first step. Initially, like off the top of my head, I do know that there are folks asking questions about, how do I charge a grant for these things, and so I think we're getting caught up in our terminology of expense recovery and that having difficulties down the road. So we're looking at changing the terminology from expense recovery to internal charges so that it's more descriptive of what it is. We're also trying to give guidance for these items, like immediately we'll be burdening these accounts, right? So if they're charged to a grant, do they receive F&A? And then that leads to other conversations of making sure that the suppliers, when they charge these internal charges, aren't including overhead so that we're not double dipping on that. And so that's kind of the evolving conversation that we're not through yet, but we are just trying to give guidance out to everybody to make sure that, again, we're talking through these items. But a lot more to come on the IPO process. Any questions so far? Okay. Again, this is more of a summary, but it's, the fund transfers, expense recoveries, faculty funds, subledger accounting rules, the cross-validation rules, the IPOs, all of these things ended up with us releasing in the central controller's office a series of procedures and documents around that. So what's available now on the controller's website under our accounting procedures are funding transfers, expense recoveries, faculty funds. We recently also issued some guidance on the reimbursement for relocation expenses to make sure you look at. And then coming out of our meetings, we have new, and I probably should have said this earlier, we had our Chart of Accounts Advisory Group, which I know you've heard a lot about. We've kind of morphed that group into a finance advisory group, and as a result, we have a list of new procedures and documentations of items that are also challenges out in the field that we need to get crisper on our explanations and our definitions, and then also provide guidance on. And those things include salary and wage fringe manual adjustments. We're trying to get to where PeopleSoft books to natural accounts in the general ledger, for salaries and fringes. We're trying to get to that point where people can go from the payroll distribution report to the general ledger. And I think one of the ideas is that we're going to reserve certain natural accounts just for that interface so that people can do that. And then manual adjustments or accruals and things like that would be in other natural accounts. And that, again, will help people as they try to reconcile from PD into the general ledger, et cetera. So that's something that's coming down the pike very shortly. We always will provide additional guidance on internally designated funds, et cetera. We have the list here of the items that we're working on that we'll be communicating shortly. And we'll be doing the same thing as it relates to training, webinars, and then the documentation. So stay tuned for more of that. Yes? Yeah. Is there any official document for funding cost shares? We don't have that yet. I don't know that exists, but we'll work with our GCA area for that. That's we'll take that down.
Do you know when the BR3s or whatever is going to become the BR3s are going to be decided on?
Well, decided on, they're working on them, right?
Okay, when will they
we
be
are
available?
working on them.
Because we have a couple years worth that we need to transfer into BR3 accounts, money that we can't use.
Yeah,
that's
so
sitting there?
we'll get a more complete listing of that, but the BR3s right now are being worked through the project review team. What got converted into sponsor projects, we've gone through and tried to verify all the revenue and expenses for those projects, and we're in the process of moving them over in the controller's office into a 2-series account. So we're still a few weeks or months away from actually making that happen.
What about new accounts that we want to convert into BR3s?
New accounts would go through the normal process. I'm not exactly sure of that. Yeah, that comes right through the controller's office.
So we can
through
do
a
that
not-
now?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah, we're setting those up as non-sponsor projects, right? As a 2, I believe, as a 2 account. So we can work through the controller's office directly for that. Yes.
I have an issue right now where fiscal 18 is closed, and we're closing a grant. You have the 90-day period where you have to move expenses. And I have conflicting information about whether you can, if fiscal 18 is closed, can you move an expense from fiscal 18 in fiscal 19?
Yeah, so thanks for that question. So I want to give some clarity on that. June data, June is closed in the general ledger. The project subledger and the general ledger are closed. However, we do have a June adjusted time period that's open. We reserve that in the controller's office for, as we work through the audit. We reserve it for audit entries. We reserve it for items when we're doing reclassifications or reconciliations of accounts that we have journal entries that we still need to do before the financials are finalized. In this case, and certainly we're using it for our grant process to the extent that there are, we're still going through project review with our folks in GCA. As they're finding, and what I said as the controller was I shut down the June time period, but we knew that they were still working on projects through through this process, through project review. Some of the adjustments that were being found related to prior, 18 and prior periods, actually. And so what we tried to do was come up with an estimate, and we asked the folks in GCA to go review all of what was outstanding and to try to give us an idea on, what kind of adjustments would they have proposed had they had enough time to put it through the project subledger. And we do have, several hundred projects that we have adjustments that our intention is to put those adjustments into the June adjusted time period, and we're having conversations with each of the units affected, so that if you had something like that, I know I'm giving you a long-winded answer, but the idea is there is a process for this. So if you have a particular grant where you wanted to talk through, you talk through the GCA team and make sure that they're in agreement with it. We have the facility to book, entries that still relate to fiscal year 18 activity, provided they're material enough. I mean, at some point we have to cut it off, but that I would take right through to GCA, and then they'll propose an entry which we will gladly book.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, just to actually talk through some of the timeline, a busy slide, but the audit starts in May, basically with the first audit committee meeting where it lays out the plan. And part of that plan was to start the interim field work, and this includes not just the financial statements, but also for the single audit. So, the KPMG, our auditors, have been in place. They've been on the ground. They were in the ground in early June, and most of the month of June. They're back now to do their final field work. They came back on site on August 20th, and we've been working with them to really get what's called the PBC list, prepared by client list. And they'll be making selections and doing things like that to continue their testing. that will go on through the month of September and October. Our audit committee meeting, where we're hoping to present final financial statements, is October 30th. And as Mike said, not hope, we will have final financial statements for that audit committee meeting. Okay. Other things that I guess we're continuing to work on a monthly close calendar. You may have heard about this, but we definitely have items like account reconciliations, bank reconciliations that we typically only did, quarterly at best, maybe annually. And we're trying to get into a process where we're doing these things more regularly on a monthly basis so that we get ahead of it, just like the budget office, so that we're getting ahead of items that need to get booked. So we're working on, there's some 106 steps that are involved in the monthly close, and we're trying to come up with who owns those steps, making sure they understand what they need to do, and they have a timeline on getting it done. Right now, we've been working on a loose close that says that, roughly by the 8th business day, we close down the GL. And we're working still towards that, but I would think through this process of the monthly close, really understanding what steps are needed, that we come up with what the right time is to close the month, and that we stick to that schedule going forward. So part of it is just making sure we have a listing of the responsibilities, the times, and the people and the accountable people working on these things on a monthly basis. But in short, right now, we are closing August. Our plan is to close August on September 13th, and that we will be closing September, our first quarter close, on October 10th. The quarter close will probably be a little more involved, as we want to try to get accruals in and things like that we're looking for, because it will be a lot of the basis for the forecasting that Chris talked about there. And then on October 30th, we have our audit committee meeting. Yes.
Thank you. Is it safe to say that the close procedures will include what's considered material for entries?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, right. So guidance on the materiality of, yes. When we're doing variance analysis, we want to give guidance as to 5 or 10% or whatever that number is. We also want to give, as it relates to accrual entries, what dollar amounts and people should be looking at. We don't want to book everything, but we do want to get materially correct. So we will be giving guidance for that.
Will the subledgers close in advance of the general ledger?
Yes. Yeah. So generally 2 days, I think it is, 2 business days. So we'll close AP and then the project subledger a couple days ahead of time. I think that because we have these subledger accounting rules and we're getting better at it, I think we might be able to close them at the same time. But we're not quite there yet. So I think we close AP and projects. We wait a couple days. Usually we have to clear out some items in suspense to close out those subledgers. And so, but yes, to answer your question. Okay, thank you very much. Go Eagles.
I can't help but comment on a few things. So thank you, Ernie. And then I'll turn it over to John. I just wanted to emphasize a few things. And first of all, you just got a lot of accounting information thrown at you. And the good news is that it's getting what I would call tighter and tighter and clearer and clearer. That's important, certainly from a central point of view, but I want to emphasize how important it is from a field point of view, how important to have consistency in how things are booked so that your local reports are reliable. Even the closing process is important so that year to year to year, you're seeing the same things captured in the month of September this year as you would next year. These are all meant to support a better set of reports for you. The whole chart of accounts is intended to provide a good set of reports for management information, not just what we have to do from a corporate compliance point of view. Even the IPO thing is something that's set up in order to allow you to easily see, where did this charge come from? What was it for? It was an internal charge, so it doesn't look the same as something you'd get through AP. But it's still important to know that, especially on grants. And oh, by the way, these are things that keep us in compliance with appropriate regulations of how to charge federal grants and contracts and New Jersey grants and contracts. So all these things build up to both reliability, accountability, also the ability to get good management information. So it isn't just a whole lot of detailed rules for the rules' sake. It really is to try to have this thing, the whole financial ledgers, tighter and tighter and tighter so that we can rely on the information coming back out of it more and more and more over the years. It's a long-term play for that, but a huge amount of work has gone into trying to really settle these things down, and we would welcome your suggestions for more of that, especially as you look at reports from your end and your needs. That kind of feedback is really important, either through Larry's shop or, contact Ernie or Kathy or Chris or any of us for that, because we're trying to make it better overall. The saying goes is that as you put in a new financial system, it takes about 2 cycles to really settle it down, and we're in that 3rd cycle now. So I'm thinking this year, what is it, clean in 19? Kathy's catchphrase is we're going to count on that this year. So I wanted to thank all of you for the patience and for contributing ideas and contributing the work there, and for the finance team for really pulling this tighter and tighter. And speaking of that, I'll turn that over to John now.
Good morning, everyone. So I want to give you some updates on what's happening in the project management office. I do want to start by giving you some project updates on some of the key projects and initiatives that our team is working on, just to keep you up to speed on some of the things. Some of this you've heard about already. A lot of what Kathy, Chris, and Ernie already spoke about is all driven out of projects coming out of the Finance PMO. So Sponsored Project Review is one of the key projects, obviously, that we've been working on. Very happy to say that we have completed, actually, the first phase only of Project Review. And what that was we had 5,600 active projects that we went through and reviewed all the expense information and all the balance information. We then turned around and took all 5,600 of those projects and sent them out to you guys, sent them out to you all in the field, sent them out to the PIs and the grant administrators and the business managers, and asked them to please look at the projects, check them, let us know if they were valid. The one very positive thing that made us feel very good about the engagement and made us know that everyone wants to get this fixed as much as we do was we got 100% response on those projects. So all 5,600 projects that went out to the field, we got somebody wrote back to us. So that was very positive in getting everything done for phase 1. We also at the same time went and reviewed all the FY18 activity on all the active projects to support the year-end financials and the audits. So right now, a lot of you are being contacted by the Controller's Office and GCA, and meetings are being scheduled to go through those 18 numbers. As Ernie was talking about June adjusted, we're going to be making adjustments for some of these. So the FY18 audit numbers reflect true FY18 activity. So we've gone through and taken care of all that. The ongoing piece of project review is we still have financial review and reconciliations to do on the remaining active projects, the ones that did not have 18 activity but are still active. And we also still have about 7,000 expired projects in the system. And the reason they're not closed out yet is because they've not gone through full financial and compliance reviews. So we have teams working on that as well. We're hoping to get through that all by the end of this calendar year. It's still a very daunting task, a lot of work, but that's our target right now, is to get through all those, and we continue to have teams working around the clock on all this information. The other thing that we're doing is developing new business processes, not just for what GCA does, but what for the people in the field are supposed to do as well. What the responsibilities and roles are for everyone, central versus the field. We have as we talked about before, committees for these other projects. We have committees for this. We have a subject matter expert group that gets together once a week. We start to look at processes. We're going to be doing training, and we're also going to be working on enhancing communication between the grants administrators and the research staffs in the field with the GCA and central offices. All right. And then again, we're also looking at potential system enhancements. A lot of work went into chart of accounts and CVRs, SLAs. There's things we can do in a sponsored project subledger to make it work a little better as well. So we're working with Oracle on some potential enhancements in the system as well. Chart of accounts, Ernie spoke a lot about. We did complete in July the first round, which was getting all the cross-validation rules and subledger accounting in place. This project is not complete by any stretch of the imagination. We will continue, as Ernie said, developing new accounting procedures. There's other potential improvements, changes, and enhancements to the actual chart of account itself. So we will continue to evolve to improve the financial system through this chart of accounts project. One of the bigger projects that's been going on for a while and is really ramping up now is our student experience. Again, we're talking a lot about the financials and the business side of what Rutgers is, but let's not forget what our primary purpose is. Yes, we are a large research institution, but it's about the students in a lot of ways. So the Student Improvement Experience Initiative is a big one. We went through the business process review. That was completed last year and earlier this year. Another thing, again, for Camden, one of the big things for the Student Experience Program is the one-stop shops. There will be virtual shops, but there will be physical shops, one on each campus. The first one to be open was Camden. That actually opened earlier this month. I think the ribbon cutting is later this month, if I'm not mistaken. But the one-stop shop for students was open in Camden. That collated all the staff from registrar, financial aid, and student accounting in the records hall on New Brunswick campus as well. All right, that's an interim shop in New Brunswick. Newark is coming up next. We're validating all the system requirements to get a new student information system as well. So we're developing the RFP right now. That will go out shortly, and we plan on selecting a new system, new student information system, by the end of this calendar year. And then we'll move into implementation. All right, and then the one-stop shop for New Brunswick, their official one-stop shop, we're targeting spring of 2020. They are opening one now. It's an interim shop in a temporary location, but we're building a new location. And then Newark will follow later in 2020, fall of 2020 or early 2021. And then we'll have all of our physical one-stops as well as our virtuals all stood up. Financial management, Chris spoke a little bit about some of these. Our account reconciliation module went live. That's complete. The plant funds was the first pilot for that. So that's for all of our bank reconciliations and account reconciliations, doing that in the system now. That's been completed. We're expanding it out to the other units now and over the next couple months. We also completed Mike spoke a little bit, and so did Ernie, about the monthly close and financial consolidations. That's the FCCS system. That's been completed. We're rolling it out. We're actually using that to support our year-end audit this year. So that's very good as far as the financial consolidations and creating our financial statements for our year-end audit. So that's out, and the final launch will be complete later this month with everything except cash flows. We're still working through some validations on that. But those are two more key financial components to improve the way finances are handled in the system as well as the way we report them out. Budget and planning, again, Kathy and Chris spoke a lot about this. The profitability and cost management module was completed earlier this year, rolled out to the budget office, and the ongoing is what Chris spoke about with the enterprise budget planning. So please make sure for cost centers, get your training this month, and then November, December for RCM and workforce planning. Mike just spoke about reporting. One of the other big things we have going on is our reporting program. It's a cornerstone reporting optimization is what we call it. We're creating a center of excellence for reporting across the university that will be there ongoing to help the way we report and the way you get information out of the system. We've had multiple work sessions. There are multiple focus groups. We've had engagement across the university. We have several hundred people have been engaged and involved in helping us determine what are the needs, what kind of reports do you need, how can we help you get information in a better way out of the system so you can perform better analytics for running your operations and your businesses throughout the university. So that's an ongoing project. We have completed the first two phases. We're actually standing up the Center of Excellence this month, and then we'll be coming back out to everyone to prioritize what reports get done. I could tell you that payroll is one we're looking at, and sponsored projects is one of the top priorities that we're looking at immediately. But then there are also some financial components that Ernie and his team are working with us to get done as well to tie into the audit. So we do have a list from our initial work groups and our initial sessions. We developed a list of over 350 requests for priority reports. So obviously we need to kind of reprioritize that a little bit and focus in a little bit more. Now, we're not saying that all those reports are not needed. Maybe they are. But obviously, you know, we don't want to rush and try to do them all at once. So we are trying to prioritize everything, but we will continue to communicate with you as we go through that. All right, and then procurement completed their P-card pilot. So I don't know how many.
The pilot currently consists of about 12 cards.
Right.
We are working on expanding that, but we had to make sure the integration with Oracle worked properly before we could even think of expansion.
Okay. We also, in the procurement office, the travel card pilot was completed. The full rollout is scheduled to be complete by December for travel cards. And Total Contract Manager is a project that's in progress right now. We're still looking at what our end date is going to be. We're hoping to get that done by the end of the calendar year as well. All right, and there'll be multiple other projects coming up in procurement, again, for how they manage contracts and suppliers moving forward. All right. Now, a lot of what we talked about, there's been a lot of improvement. There's been a lot of challenge from the implementation. There's still things, as Mike just said, we're entering into our third cycle, and there's still things we're cleaning up. And, you know, when I arrived here at Rutgers and from working closely with the folks up here in the finance team, you know, one of the challenges that I saw and that everybody agreed with was one of the things that happened was a lot was done centrally. A lot of things were done, for lack of a better term, in a vacuum. And we didn't spend a lot of time doing a lot of engagement across the university. There was a lot of emails, there was a lot of information sent out, but the way we went about getting the users and the community involved in everything was something that we thought we could do a better job at. So you heard a lot about some of the successes that we've had recently, and you hear a lot about the webinars and work sessions and the communications that are going out. And that's really about us taking a step back and taking a very hard look and a better focus on saying, if we are going to be successful in this endeavor, we need the entire university to be there with us. We can't just go do this sitting in Knightsbridge Road in Piscataway and throw it out there and say, here you go. We need you engaged, we need you involved, and we need you involved in the very beginning, not when we're done. We need you to help us and work with us along the way. So we've seen a lot of improvement along those lines over the last several months. One of the other things that we said was we have to work with people that really understand what we're doing, because it is going to change the way you work. The way you do things today is going to change tomorrow. We need to start talking to you about that now. We need to understand, first of all, what are you doing today? How do you do your job today? So we can understand if what we are proposing to do is going to be an improvement and help the way you do your job and make you understand what that change is going to impact to you. So over the last several months, what we've done within the PMO is we have built a change management office under our project management office. The focus of that is for engagement. That change management office now, we've established it. We built the operating models and methodologies. We've stood up the CMO. It's fully functional. And we're now in the process of moving into the projects. We have full end-to-end change management methodology engaged in all projects at this point. And our operating models and our management playbook is being leveraged, and again, to apply consistency across the way we manage projects, across all of finance and all PMO projects. And we continue to host knowledge transfer sessions to help folks understand how to manage change with their teams. Because for those of you in management and supervisory positions, you know, it's your staff you have to worry about. How are they going to react? Do they understand what's happening and how this is going to benefit and help and support them? All right, so we have stood up that office. You'll hear a lot more about it as we move forward. The other thing we've tried to work on very hard is communications. How do we get a hold of people? How do we engage people? Can we get more people engaged? So we, you know, basically revised, went back and took a look and created new templates and tools to help us standardize and upgrade the way we communicate. We have a full communication plan toolbook now that's rolled out for every project that helps us manage communications across the university on each of our individual projects. We're trying to make better use of technology, current and new technologies, and trying to get away from just saying, just send emails, they'll read them. That worked out real well, didn't it? It does work. We have to use email, obviously. But that can't be our only mode of communication with everyone. Okay, because the other thing that happens is you get inundated. There's only 5 projects or so I went through here. Just in the PMO alone, we're managing 40 projects. If I just tried to update you on every one of them via email, you'd get real sick of my emails and real tired of me pretty quick and stop reading them, and we don't want that. But there's other ways to engage with people as well, especially now, as we talked about. One of the things we're moving into is student experience. It's a whole new generation. You can't communicate with that generation right now just via email. So we're looking at things like getting into social media and getting involved in other areas as well. But for now, what we've done is really tried to make better use of some of the tools we do have available. So partnering with the change management office and the project teams. We've tried to make better use of websites, the chart of accounts. Kathy was lead on that and Ernie very involved, but one of the things we did early on in that project that really helped us was we created a specific website just for that project. So people could go and get all the information they needed from that. We also hosted open forums where Kathy went out to all the campuses early on in the project and told everybody, here's what we're doing over the next few months, here's why we're doing it, here's how we're doing it, and here's why we need your help. And that really got engagement going. We held webinars to get everybody up to speed on all the different procedures and processes and the things Ernie spoke about, and explain cost recoveries and faculty funds and everything else that we had going on. All right, so again, we just tried to expand the way we got to people. You know, the webinars were very helpful. It got us away from just trying to schedule training courses where we can only get 15 or 20 people in a room at a time. We needed to reach thousands. That would have taken forever. So webinars, we can hit several hundred people at a time. So we've really tried to focus on increasing our online and live stream training sessions. The Cornerstone website, we did some significant enhancements back in November of last year. We continue to enhance that. We're building out specific sections in that website now for budget and planning and forecasting, for reporting, for student experience. For student experience, actually, if you haven't seen it yet, we just launched it about 2 weeks ago. There is a brand new website that's been developed specifically for student experience that faculty, staff, and students can all go in at any time and get updates and see where we are with that program. All right, so we're just trying to, again, expand out the way we get to folks and also the number of places you can go to find information. As far as training goes, again, with the webinars is one thing. Another thing that we did earlier this year was in late January of this year, we opened up a new computer-based hands-on training center in Knightsbridge Road location in New Brunswick. We can house up to 35 people in that room at a time for hands-on training. So between that and webinars and the numbers here, so we started tracking in February of the number of people that we had through to get actually trained, actual employees that we provided training for. So when we started tracking in February, from February through August, classroom training, hands-on computer-based training, we trained over 3,000 people since February. This is on a variety of different topics, a variety of different subjects, you know, grants and contracts, procurement, expenses, controller's office, whatever it might be. And then through the webinars, now these webinar numbers only represent what was done for, we did some webinars for the procurement group, and we did webinars for chart of accounts. That's all that's reflected in these numbers. We have done other webinars for other groups, but we haven't gathered those numbers yet. But just those two groups alone, that's 1,717. That's just what we can track as far as people who registered and actually logged in. We could see they were in the session. We would say that's probably the low number because we know what happens a lot of times is someone like Terry will register for a webinar, but she'll hold it in the conference room across the hall and there's 15 people in the room with her. We can't capture all that. So this would be the low end of the number. But even at the low end, you're looking at almost 5,000 people have been through training through PMO in the last 6 months. Okay, so again, it's about getting the engagement and getting people early on and trained before these things roll out. You know, all these webinars that happen and much of this training that's happening is on these new procedures and processes, and we're doing that well in advance of these things going live and you being asked to use them every day. So when folks like Chris and Kathy and Ernie and Mike and myself stand up and tell you training's being offered and we encourage you to do it, that's why. Because we don't want you sitting there, come into work one day and go, ooh, wait a minute, this is live today? Uh-oh. And you got to run around, find somebody in your office. Hey, did anybody go to that training? There's plenty of training available, and we're trying to make it more convenient too. And we also try to make sure that every time we do training, we hit every campus. All right, because we don't want everybody to have to come to New Brunswick, and it's just too hard. But we also have the webinars, and we're also working on now, as we're live streaming the town hall today, more video-based training, where we're actually taping the training or we're doing video training ourselves and putting it out there on the web. So if you can't make it to a class or you can't make it to a webinar, you can log in and check the video training anytime you want. All right, so we're going to start building that up through the training website within the PMO as well. So you'll see a lot more notices coming out about video training and house training, and we're going to build a training archive. I know Jackie and her team are working on that in communications in conjunction with our training group. Okay? So again, it's really all about communication and engagement with you all. We're not going to be successful up here in finance. We can do all we want and think we're doing the greatest thing in the world. We may be making a lot of improvements. But if you're not engaged and don't understand, don't support us, we're all going to succeed or fail together, and we would really like to succeed if we can. I think we've all seen enough of the other side in recent times. So your engagement and support is very, very important. So if you ever feel like you're not getting enough information, please reach out and let us know. If there's things we can do to help you, if there's training, if you want us to come sit with your staffs, if there's anything we can do to assist you through all these transformations, please let us know. Any questions? I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Thank you, John. So we've been doing these town halls for, I'm coming up on 5 years at the end of this month, so it was just shortly after that. And if you see that they've moved from what was the immediate issues on the financial system to a more holistic view of different things going on. And that's because this is not about cornerstone of system implementation. That's a big tool of it. And Cornerstone consists not just of the financial system, but also the budget system, HR payroll to come, student information to come. But it's more transforming the financial and administrative operations of the institution. Part to take into account the fact that we merged with another university, part to get up to date, part to recognize that this institution is unique in its organization and needs different management tools, different levels of the institution. So a lot of exciting things going on, even though we went through what I would call the kind of rocky road initially. It was foundational to what is now coming up, exciting things like HR Service Center, new HR payroll system, improving the student experience. I know everyone in this room who has any involvement with student information systems would say that that was probably the thing we should have done first, except we needed to do so much work to prepare for it. I mean, all the years that we have been involved in working with the registrar offices, the financial aid offices, the student accounting offices, admissions, to get a handle on how to serve the students better. All that work has been preparatory to selecting a system soon that will ultimately be for the benefit of the student and the experience coming on there. So it's exciting, it's daunting, we still have a lot of work to do. I think a lot of the discipline procedures and kind of change management activities that have gone on really recently are also foundational towards having a better outcome, having a better experience going through the changes that are to come. So it's exciting, it's scary, it's daunting, it's challenging. We have a great team, this entire university, and it's very exciting going forward. So with that, I would like to open up for any and all questions, not just on the topics we covered here, anything else that you'd like to ask about. And then also remember we have the Ask the Expert sessions coming up. Where are they? In this room? Okay. Immediately after here. So with that, yeah, we around the mic.
So we've been through 2 years of financial changes, and I still don't trust the encumbrance reports. I know I moan about this all the time, but you have to know what is encumbered to really know how much money you have left to spend. So has there been any progress on that?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. It's certainly one of the items that bothers us too. But we're still working through some of the challenges on the encumbrances. We'll hope to have a better update for you shortly, but it's not immediate.
And then I brought this up again think the last town hall, about the cross-reference between the foundation and the gifts and the gift accounts. Has there been any progress on that?
Yeah, so we are, this is something that's gone much slower than I hoped. And part of that has to do with distractions from more immediate things. There is no reason why we don't have, I mean, the foundation sits right, I mean, not just physically, but emotionally and virtually right next to us. And there's no reason why we can't have a very, very tight connection there. And there's no reason on their part that we don't. It's a matter of sitting down procedurally. It's a matter of sitting down and really integrating the systems. And in fact, we are looking towards actually integrating the systems that each institution uses to get that working. Sometimes it has to do with donor issues. That's a very small percentage. Most of it has to do with simply procedural things. And part of the closing that we're talking about here, the rigorous closing process, is to have that to be part of the foundation's activities as well, whether it be transmittal of gifts, setup of gift accounts, any of the pieces that go along with that. It's really important that we know when those things come in the door, that they're booked in the right time frames, that we understand pledges and when they're expected, and also when they actually occur. There's a lot of pieces there that matter from a management standpoint and from a financial reporting standpoint. So, you know, this is the year that has to happen. And in fact, I want it to happen before we hit what is the biggest time of the year, and that's December. So that we have a very, very, very good feel for how our gift flow from the foundation. And again, there's no disagreement on either side. It's a matter of just, it's time to sit down and do it.
Well, Rome wasn't built in a day, and you guys have done a tremendous job. I have 30.1 years of financial experience, from a cashier in a bookstore to a CFO of 2 units. So I like where we're going, and I think you guys should be applauded for what you've done. Thanks.
Appreciate that. I don't know if applause is appropriate yet, but maybe sometime. Any other questions? Come on. Anything on the web? Do we get any questions coming in? Yes, we are interactive with the web.
Yeah, we have someone just appreciating the forum, saying for those of us who are not able to commute and attend in person, this forum and ability to attend remotely is quite nice.
Thank you.
And
You know,
someone
just on that point, we all subsequent ones of these, regardless of where they're located, and we do physically rotate through all the campuses, will be on the web. That's one of the things that we've gotten a lot of feedback on that's important. And there have been some areas where it wasn't we didn't want to do it, it was that the room or the area wasn't set up for it, and I think we've addressed those now. So all subsequent meetings will be available on the web. So I think the next one is in New Brunswick, so keep an eye out for that, watch it, send in your comments. And the other?
And one last one just to Arnie. What's the biggest size fish you caught?
And what type?
Unfortunately, it was too many years ago, but it was a 150-pound big eye tuna. It was July of 16.
That's some serious sushi. Anything else? All right. Well, thanks to all of you here. Thanks to anybody on the web who's watching. This session is also recorded and will be posted. If you want to go back and look at something at your leisure, that'll be available on the website. So thanks again, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks to the team.